Okay, deja vu again. Seem to be having a lot of those here recently. Yet another Cobra 2000 GTL. Customer sent this one in to be restored. Came in, good working radio, not really stable on frequency because it did have a channel modification. It definitely has a channel modification now. You can see we have a channel king board in it, so you can see we definitely, get high in channel. Goes up to, I think I got this one said it goes up to 200. But the frequency modification that it had in it was actually laying over here somewhere. Was one of these. It was in the auxiliary jack. Now, luckily, when whoever did the modification left the jack inside the radio. They left all the wiring. They just basically took the nut off, enlarged a hole that was already on the chassis, stuck the jack in that, and put the nut on it. So all I had to do was remove this, take the jack, slide it back into the hole, put the nut back on, back to original. The reason I don't like these, and they're now on AM, yeah, they're probably fine if you're only talking AM. But on sideband, these things can just cause horrible frequency drift. And the big problem with these things is this wire. If it wasn't for the wire, it wouldn't be so bad. The problem is this wire is in parallel across these crystals. So, and you'll see there's one empty socket there. So there was actually the crystal that's in the radio. In the case of this one, these radios came with one of two crystals for the tripler circuit, either an 11.1125 megahertz or an 11.325 megahertz. This one had the 11.325 megahertz crystal. So that crystal had been removed and then moved up to this circuit board. And you'll see there's two trimmer resistors, let me try that again. Trimmer capacitors, but there's none for the third crystal. That's because you would move that crystal to this board, you'd put this switch in the middle position, do your frequency alignment, your normal alignment to the radio, and then what you would do is switch to either low or high. So what this is meant to do is give you 40 low channels, 40 high channels. But you switch to one of those, and then you would adjust these trimmer capacitors to calibrate the crystals to get it close. The problem is these wires are attached to these crystals and go down to the circuit board where you actually remove the original crystal. Well, the problem is this wire is a capacitor. It acts exactly like a capacitor. The wires, for starters, are parallel to each other. The second problem is they're rather long. You've got to get, now from here, because this switch was mounted right here, all the way over back into here. The tiniest bit of movement, just expansion and contraction from heat, can cause tiny movement in this wire that causes frequency change. And you could literally grab these wires and you can move these. If you physically move them, you can see frequency changes of like 800 to close to 1,000 hertz just by putting your finger down on the radio, key the radio, or you just look at the frequency counter and just moving this thing back and forth. You see horrible frequency drift. So yeah, customer wanted to get rid of that and put in a channel king board, so that was stuck in. It also had apparently, I guess this was a Roger beep board that didn't beep. It clicked. I mean, it switched into transmit, but I don't know if maybe it had shorted out. This, as you can see, there's kind of some white residue on there. It looks like it was probably, I'm going to have to guess, super glue. Somebody had super glued this to the bottom of the chassis, and it had broken loose. And you have to remember, the bottom cover on this radio is steel. And yeah, this thing would have landed on that steel. See, I don't know if it shorted out and burned it up or what, but he didn't need this. He got the channel king board installed that has Roger beeps installed in it. So yeah, no biggie. That had to go away anyhow. Other than that, there weren't a lot of modifications in this radio. It had actually been taken really good care of. I think he said this one was his father's, and his father only ever took this to a local shop. And I'd have to say the guy was not a screwdriver, because it still had all the limiters intact. So the AMC, ALC circuits were still fully intact. The modulation was set at 100%. It was adjusted properly. So yeah, that's good. Now the only problem was, of course, I'd take this out, put the crystal back in the radio, which I did. I finally get in to go do the alignment, and yeah, I just can't get anything. The tripler circuit just will not align. I just cannot get the frequencies right. Come to find out, I guess the crystal, actually, this is the 11.325 megahertz crystal that was in this little board right here. This crystal, for starters, was all frequency. I could get AM and lower sideband calibrated properly, but I couldn't get upper sideband. It was way off. The frequencies had just, the crystal apparently has drifted high. And then I noticed what it said on the side. Jan. Yeah, that's a company that they're no longer in business, used to make crystals, and yeah, they weren't known for making the best crystals in the world, so yeah, that might have been part of the problem. So I stuck in another 11.325 megahertz crystal. That made it better, but it's still, I just couldn't get it right. And it's like, what is wrong with this thing? A little bit more snooping and sniffing around. In the upper sideband circuit, I found that someone had bodged. Just reach over here and grab them. Had stuck in a couple ceramic caps in there, I guess in an attempt to get the frequency right. Now this one wasn't so bad. This is an NPO rated cap. It's got a little black top on it. This one, however, is not an NPO capacitor. Matter of fact, this thing's what? 1 kilovolt capacitor. Yeah, we don't need a kilovolt capacitor in the oscillator circuit in a solid state radio, but yeah, the big problem here is it's not a temperature compensated capacitor, so you don't want to use something like this in an oscillator circuit, because as temperature changes, as this capacitor change temperature inside the radio, its capacitance is going to vary more than one like this, which is designed to have a very stable capacitance over a large temperature range. So I took them out, put in the proper capacitor. I was almost there. I could get within like 200 hertz, but the core would bottom out on the transformer. It's like, it's getting better. Every time it's a little bit better, a little bit better. The frequencies is starting to shift in the right direction, but it's like, you've got to be kidding me. It's still off. The transformer was bad. Yeah, it's apparently, I don't know if it's nuked inside. I'd need to tear it apart and take a look at it. But yeah, apparently, and this is a coil. This one's not a tunable transformer. I don't think. Actually, I'd have to look at the schematic really quick. I think that one's just a coil. Let me just grab the schematic here and look. Yeah, they're just tunable coils. Yeah, right there. So, in any case, I replaced it. Voila! I could get that coil, I could get the ferrite core in the coil back into the center of its range, and the frequency was dead on. So, yeah, I guess when they stuck this thing in there, like I say, that's the problem. These things are, when you end up adding all this capacitance from these wires, you end up then having to do other modifications to the radio, trying to get the frequency right. And then, like I say, the problem is it's never stable. You just bump the radio and the wire shimmies, and yeah, the frequency just wobbles then. But yeah, all that was put back. Only other thing, I mean, the normal restore electrolytic capacitors replaced, clean off the corrosive glue, pulled the heat sinks out, clean them up, and apply new heat sink compound. What else? Just like the other one, like I say, this is like the third radio in a row I've done of Cobra 2000s. Like I say, I don't see a certain model radio, seems like forever, and then all of a sudden I get a flood of them. But I think it was the last one. I don't think it was the first one. I think the last one I did the same thing I did to this one. The customer wanted variable power added to this one, so like that one, you'll notice that it now has 3 double controls. Originally this was just the tone control, had a single knob like this or like this. That control was removed, a double control was installed, and an original set of Cobra 2000 double knobs was stuck on here, so it still keeps the original appearance of the radio. But yeah, so the outside knob here is the tone, and then the inside or rear control is the variable power. So here's a peek of the inside. Like I say, it was a really nice, clean radio to start with. Had not been butchered on and hacked at over the decades. Like I say, just a couple capacitors. That's enough to drive you nuts. You're almost there with the frequency, and yeah, you just can't. Not quite enough. That's really annoying. And that's a problem is trying to figure out what did somebody do to the radio. Don't be surprised when you're undoing modifications or just trying to figure out what modifications were done to a radio. Trying to figure out how they did it, because when you install stuff like this, people can come up with lots of different ways. If the frequencies are off, there's lots of different ways to shift that frequency back into where you want it. People might add inductors, they might add capacitors, they might add capacitors and inductors in circuit. They may be sticking some in parallel or in series with, it's just a matter of tracking down which parts had been replaced. A lot of times, unfortunately, it's just a matter of look at the schematic, look at the value it's supposed to have, look in the radio and see what's in it, and just back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Now, a lot of times the easiest thing to do is, and it's usually what I do, and it's what I did with this one, so I actually have it still sitting here. I actually just have an old circuit board out of a radio, the same chassis, so it's very simple. I can just look in this one and go, okay, this capacitor, yeah, it should be, look at the value, look down in the radio, check, and just back and forth between boards, trying to find out which capacitors. Like I said, it's a lot faster doing it that way than trying to look at the capacitor on the schematic. What's its identification number? Then trying to find that on the circuit board down here, where you can just generally just go over all the capacitors in this entire tripler circuit area. It's really fast. Just look at the value on this one, look at the value down there, look at the next one, look down, look at the value and down. And same thing with the inductors. Look at the paint dots, because all of these have little paint dots on there to indicate their values, the inductance. Same thing there, just check back and forth to make sure that the correct parts are in here. But yeah, that can, like I say, it just hair pulling sometimes trying to do stuff like that. So I think that's pretty much it. Like I say, I got didn't have a lot in it. Like I say, this little Roger beat board. Took this out, replaced the transformer, and a couple caps, and yeah, that pretty much was it. There really wasn't a lot to do with it, because like I say, there was no troubleshooting. It was a good working radio. Oh, I have changed out all the light bulbs, put in LEDs, but yeah, otherwise you can see and I didn't even dust this. I didn't have to dust it. I didn't have to vacuum clean it out. What you see cleanness wise in here, that's exactly how it was when I took the cover off. This is one of the, usually when I get clean radios, I still do have to vacuum out a little bit of dust. This one was just literally dust-free. There wasn't anything in it. Yeah, so dusting would have done no good because there was no dust to remove. So, there you go. There's another Cobra 2000 GTL ready to be put back into service and be used for a couple more decades.